have thought that the reboot of the Star Trek universe would just be a showreel for J.J. Abrams to show off so he could direct the new Star Wars movie? My name's Charlie, and this is what's distracting me right now. So Star Trek is a reboot of a film series based around a TV show that takes place in the same universe as said film series and TV show, but in an alternate timeline to said film series and TV show. Never thought I'd say that about a movie. Now I'll start off by saying that I never really watched Star Trek as a kid or before this. The only film that I'd seen from Star Trek was Wrath of Khan, and that was just because I caught it midway through on the telly. And I never saw any of the episodes, so I went into this mostly blind. I'd only, in the TV show, actually seen memes. But the line must be drawn here, this far and no further. If J.J. Abrams is going to take on my childhood with the sequel trilogy, then I better know what he's done. The movie starts off with Chris Hemsworth playing George Kirk, and he's in one of those, the 10-minute heart-shredding prologues to a film. Like, if you've seen Up, you know what I'm talking about. This tore out my heartstrings completely. So, Chris Pine, who plays James T. Kirk, must have seen the prologue because now he's just an aimless hothead that pretty much has nothing going for him in his life. Which is a nice contrast to seeing Shatner's James T. Kirk. This is a new timeline within the Star Trek universe, which means that they can change a lot about the story without it actually detracting from the story as a whole, which I like. I can see some Star Trek fans freaking out about some of the changes that they made in this, but ultimately, J.J. Abrams made this Star Trek movie to appeal to movie lovers, not just Star Trek lovers. And I love this because I've always operated under the philosophy that adaptations should be a good movie first and a good adaptation second. I love The Shining, for example, but it's worlds apart from the Stephen King book. I'd question some of the changes if they'd made the film worse as a whole, but it's not like they sewed Deadpool's mouth shut in this, so ultimately most of the changes that they made actually served the film's narrative and made it so much better as a whole. This isn't Star Trek the motion picture, this is actually a good film. Now, Kirk and Spock had a really good relationship in this. At the start, Spock kind of disliked Captain Kirk, or he wasn't a captain back then, but he wasn't even a cadet, really. And James Kirk was kind of indifferent to him. Then, after a huge event in a movie, shit hits the fan, and James Kirk confronts Spock about it. And Spock is half human, so you've got this inner conflict between his emotional, rash human side and his logical and emotionless Vulcan side. I always question the emotionlessness of the Vulcans because they still feel love and bitterness, but whatever. But this confliction hits really hard with him and he just completely loses it. The two end up resenting each other's guts after this, and until the end when they eventually reconcile and give us the Spock and Kirk that we all know. The one that held one of the most emotional moments in film during Wrath of Khan. You also have the rest of the crew of the Enterprise. You've got one of the MILF guys from American Pie as one of the pilots. You've got an annoying racial German stereotype as another one of the pilots. Simon Pegg as Scotty, in which I'm sure is his audition for the Star Wars movies. Zoe Saldana as how the fuck do you say that? And Carl Urban as Leonard, damn it man, McCoy. They had an interesting dynamic, but ultimately were just supporting Spock and Kirk, which I don't mind, because I really connected with these two characters. There were two pretty crap parts of the film for me. One of them was the villain. Eric Bana plays Nero, who I just hated. Not hated as in good hated, as in Dolores Umbridge despised. As in bad hate, as in the character was just terrible. He was effectively a whiny child in a grown, bald, tattooed man's body. Which kind of sucks because Eric Bana has already played a bald, tattooed bad guy and he was really good as it. He just sucked in this role. He had a really generic backstory and really a convoluted and ununderstandable scheme. His plan was ultimately pointless. I don't even think Vulcans could find logic in this plan. What he wanted to do was a really contrived way of putting in place what needed to happen in the movie at that time. The other irritating bit was the lens flares, which really annoyed me until I found out J.J. Abrams' reasoning for them. His reasoning was that the future is so bright and so vibrant that it couldn't possibly be contained inside the frame, which is why the lens flares happen. Which is a very cool explanation, but they still annoyed me. They still gave me a headache. So in conclusion, Star Trek was a fantastic sci-fi flick that managed to market the universe to someone who'd never watched Star Trek before, which is a really cool undertaking. I could follow what was going on despite it still having ties to the original canon, which is a really cool way of bringing new fans and existing fans together to watch a really well put together film. It has awesome character interactions between Chris Pine's Kirk and Zachary Quinto's Spock, and a general all-round great cast. Apart from a weak villain and a literally blinding visual annoyance, this movie was amazing. So I'll end this off by asking you, what is your favourite Star Trek character? Mine's always been Spock, because I've just loved his emotional and logical confliction in him that makes him so much of a more interesting character than the rest of the people in the show. It's not to say I dislike the rest of the people in it, but I just love Spock so much. As always, I'm Charlie, and live long and prosper.